So 5 or 6 years ago, at an Expo East event, we were thinking about ways that we could possibly develop a growing media platform, beverage media platform, into something greater than it was. And at that point, I decided to turn to one of the smartest guys I know, and that's our first speaker, Seth Goldman. And he heard what I had to say, and he looked at me and said, well, just write about food. That's where the market's going. And, you know, apparently Seth took his own advice, and here we are now. Seth is the executive chairman of Beyond Meat. And before that, he started Honest Tea. And his run at that company became something of a crossroads for most of the industry. It worked to link pioneers like Gary Hirshberg or Ben and Jerry with a new guard of venture-backed entrepreneurial brands. Since then, he's advised, invested in, and just plain encouraged most of this industry, while serving as an unofficial and at times official spokesman and inspiration for what it can be. He's here to share insights he's gained from scaling food and beverage businesses from different perspectives and roles. And it's my honor to welcome Seth Goldman to Project NOSH Live. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. It's really, this is such an exciting moment for food and beverage because there's never been a time where impact and opportunity have coincided so powerfully. Meaning we are all have the chance to remake the way food is made, how it's marketed, and realize great growth opportunities at the same time. And so I want to share with you a little bit about what I see happening in both food and beverage, and also some thoughts on leading both companies, both as CEO or TeaEO, as well as executive chair, sort of from a board perspective. So first, let's just talk about where food is moving. I talk about it as really moving in two different directions. And where it's moving away from is this right here. You know, sliced bread or Wonder Bread used to be amazing because it stayed fresh so long. Wasn't that interesting? How do they keep it fresh so long? Well, when you look at the ingredient deck and you see things like dough conditioner and what's in there, you realize that's not something I'd even want to put in my hair, let alone in my body. And so what's happened is food is moving in two ways. People are moving away from this through an undoing of food. That's a term I first heard from my friends at Back to the Roots, this idea of simplification of supply chains, transparent ingredients, authentic sourcing. And then it's also moving towards redoing, and that's a little bit about what Beyond Meat is. But I'm going to give you just two quick summaries of the companies I'm involved in so you can understand my perspective, and then we'll get into the under the hood and talk about how to run these kind of companies. So Honest Tea, a lot of you know the story, so I won't spend as much time on it except to say that when you undo food, it means it's simple and transparent, and it literally can be made in your kitchen, as Honest Tea was made. You know, my first sale was made with 5 thermoses of tea I made in my kitchen and an empty Snapple bottle I pasted a label on. We've now scaled the business. We're a part of Coca-Cola. Honest Tea's in over 130,000 accounts. Our most recent success was to bring the brand to McDonald's, where Honest Kids is now part of the Happy Meal, which is a huge step. And then just this past summer, or this spring, we've launched across Europe, and it's really exciting to see how that's grown. So just to give you a sense of how we communicate what undoing of food is, I'm going to share with you a short ad we made in India earlier this spring. 20 years ago, I co-founded Honest Tea with a simple mission. Use organic ingredients to create delicious tea that's just a tad sweet. Along the way, we learned many valuable lessons, like how being fair trade certified helps us invest in sustainable tea communities, and how building a better future is really about building better relationships. As our family grew, so did our products, and our commitment to always remain refreshingly honest. So that's what happened when I got thirsty, but let me tell you what happened when I got hungry. About 6 years ago, it was my wife's birthday, and she was reading an article about this company getting started on the West Coast called Beyond Meat, which was seeking to replicate the taste and texture of meat. And it really hit me just the way the article described the vision, because our family has been vegetarian for 13 years, and we've been consistently dissatisfied with the options, the meat replacement options. In fact, I joke that if the meat industry had a secret conspiracy to discourage people from becoming vegetarian, the veggie burger would have been the perfect strategy, because everyone eats one once. You say, I don't really need to be vegetarian that badly. And just to give you a sense, I was trying to think, how could I illustrate the lack of appeal of vegan and vegetarian products? In fact, there was just a study out last month that showed that vegan was like the worst marketing tag you could put on a package. I found a picture from Houston after Hurricane Harvey. Terrible times. The people were really desperate. The grocery shelves were cleaned out, except for one part of the store. And then this is the vegan alternatives. And it's no more powerful case to tell you that people are trying to avoid these products. And so what we realized is, if we want to make vegan or plant-based products appealing, we need to get out of that shelf. We need to find a different way to connect with the consumer. And so Beyond Meat did it at a much more basic level. So what most veggie burgers do, veggie burger companies, they put together a bunch of ingredients, they mush them together, and they say that's a veggie burger. And the innovation will be, this time we'll put quinoa in it or some other grain. Beyond Meat started from a very different perspective. We literally did an MRI of a hamburger. And we looked at it from the very deep cellular level, cellular structure. And we said, okay, well, what is it? It's really just an assembly. There's amino acids that form the proteins. Well, the same amino acids that are in meat occur in peas, so we can extract those amino acids. And then, of course, it's the lipids that form the fats. Well, we have those same fats in coconut oil and canola oil. And then what's magical, and of course 70% water, all of these components exist in the plant kingdom. So it's not that the animal has some proprietary exclusive ingredient. What the animal does uniquely is assemble the fats and proteins and distributes them in a way that appeals and retains the texture and the taste of meat. We said so this is really much more of a physics problem. It's more of a chemistry problem. We don't need to create some magical ingredient. We just need to assemble them in a different way. And so when we do that the right way, we come out with something that looks like this. And what was exciting about Beyond Meat, our first sale, that really our breakthrough sale, was to a meat buyer. And we said, we want you to carry this in the meat section. And the buyer said, well, look, I'm a meat buyer. I don't eat veggie burgers, I don't buy veggie burgers, and I don't merchandise veggie burgers. But then we put it on a grill, and he heard the sizzle, and he got the aroma. He said, okay, I get this. I'll try it. That was a Whole Foods buyer. And then the next step was Safeway, and we managed to get into Safeway, and they put it in the meat section. And when you do it the right way, and I'm just going to share with you, these are the sales from a West Coast chain, 100-plus store chain. The rolling 12-week sales, average turnover, average velocity in the meat section. And you can see that the Beyond Burger is the fastest moving packaged burger in the meat section. Not the fastest selling, veggie burger, just flat out packaged burger. And that's a breakthrough. This is changing behavior of retailers, which in turn changes behavior of consumers. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my theory of change and how we make that happen. But for us, this is creating all kinds of excitement for us as a business, as well as around the country for what this can be. We've also launched a product into food service channels, so now it's carried at TGI Fridays. And what's funny, they just showed us their June menu. Their burger part of their, TGI Fridays, big burger restaurant, the first burger you see on their burger menu, the burger page, is the Beyond Burger. So they really understand this is now reaching a different type of consumer. You would never have seen that had it been a veggie burger, the typical veggie burger. So let's talk about, before we talk about how to lead these companies, what are the commonalities between undoing and redoing of food and beverage? And for me, it's true, I started in beverage. I really don't see, there's not that much difference. There's obviously a different little bit of route to market, but to me, the bigger distinction is between undoing and redoing of food. So what are the keys? First is taste. You can talk all you want about certifications. If it doesn't taste great, you don't get that opportunity to have that meeting with, with the meat buyer. The meat buyer, I could have made the most compelling case about the environmental impact of meat or about our vision. If it didn't taste great, if that meat buyer didn't say, this tastes good enough to put in the burger section, we weren't going to get that opportunity. Transparency and authenticity are still important, even in a product like redoing of food. We still have to be transparent about what the ingredients are. We have to be able to talk about how it's made and show how it's made. And then at some point soon, we'll be able to show the farmer growing the peas that in turn lead to the product you see on the shelf. Health and environmental concerns are really a driver here. This is what is encouraging people to turn away from what I say is large or conventional food, which they see as not meeting their health and environmental concerns. And then it's also not usually in the playbook of the large companies, and that's why there's so much opportunity. Because the big companies don't get undoing the same way people in this audience do, and whether that means an authentic connection to organic farms and gardens, but just understanding that whole, both the messaging and the sourcing, and then the redoing as well is something that's new and also useful for an entrepreneur to bring that kind of vision. So what is it about the entrepreneur? Well, there's really 3 key tasks every entrepreneur has, and I'm just going to share with you briefly because these are also commonalities. So the first one is they have to come up with an inspiring idea or vision. The one that got me at Honest Tea, of course, was just a less sweet drink, right? At Beyond Meat, it was reading an article, that article I read, and it talked about transforming the meat section of the store into the protein section. So it's not just hamburgers, chicken breast, or turkey breast. It's cow protein, chicken protein, and plant protein, all part of the same continuum. That was a big idea that I got and I wanted to be part of. So it also has to be a radically different idea. It can't just be, oh, we're gonna make a veggie burger, but it's gonna be a little bit better. Or with Honest Tea, oh, we're gonna make an 85-calorie drink instead of a 100-calorie drink. We go to 17 calories, and so someone can clearly taste the difference. The next thing is to generate the resources to bring it to life, and that could mean raising money from investors. The best way to generate the resources, of course, is to be able to have positive gross margins that really build, your own money, but also investing your own time and not having a fallback. That's the CEO's job, is to not have a fallback. I remember there was a moment where just before I left my job in the investment world to launch Honest Tea, I got on the phone with Barry, my co-founder, who was and still is a professor at Yale School of Management. So I said to Barry, okay, I'm ready to leave my job at Calvert, but are you sure? We never made the tea before. Are you sure we're going to be able to make the tea? And there's this long pause because he knew he wasn't leaving his job. He said, well, I bet if you went on a sabbatical, if you asked to go on sabbatical, that they'd let you do that. And they would have, but I knew that wasn't what I needed. I needed to be all in on the business and have no fallback, and that is the CEO's job. And then hire and manage the team to bring it to life. And I'm so lucky here to have Chuck Muth and Matt Plume, 2 leaders who worked with me at Honest Tea, who are here now all representing Beyond Meat, because you've got to find the best people who ought to know how to build and scale an enterprise and keep them engaged, put them in the right position. But the CEO also has to have credibility in managing those people because the CEO has to have done every part of the business. You can always delegate at some point, but you can't delegate the knowledge. You have to have the knowledge, and then you can delegate once you get to scale. And now from the perspective of the executive chair, it is a little bit different. In both companies, I'm no longer running the business the way I used to. And so as the executive chair, it's really about pushing to maintain clarity, to make sure that we stay true to the mission. Now, in the case of Honest Tea, this is actually a really important role because inevitably there's going to be corporate creep. There's times where someone from Atlanta will want to do something and I have to be able to say no. And the founder is really the only person who can say no in a way that is clear. Everyone knows when I say no, I'm not doing it for any agenda. I'm not trying to get myself to the next position. I'm doing it because I believe in it. And it's been fun now that we scale Honest Tea around the globe. They reached out in Europe. They said, we want to launch a product called Honest Coffee. Okay, well, what's it? I said, well, tell me about it. Said, well, it's organic, lower calorie, fair trade certified. I'm like, that sounds great. Then in another part of the world, they said, we want to launch Honest Juice. What is that? Well, it's organic. It'll be sourced sustainably. And I said, but what's the calorie profile? Because if it's 100% juice, that's not our position. I said, no, I guess you're right. I said, well, we can't do it. So it was worthy of them to think about trying to do it organically, but it just didn't make sense under the platform. And once you're the chair of the board, you're no longer putting every bit of your livelihood on the line, but you do still have to step up and help the CEO, have the resources to grow, and that's certainly something I've been involved with. But the most important role of a board chair is to support the CEO and to ask the questions that no one else asks the CEO. Being a CEO is lonely work. It's challenging work. There's a lot of late nights or early mornings where you're sort of sweating, and there's no one asking, how are you doing? What are you doing how much you got in the tank? Are you feeling okay with the balance? Are you able to you know, sort of get some way to relax? And that's something that CEOs really aren't often asked. And so they're so busy taking on the stress of everything else, they don't necessarily get to think about their overall wellness. And that's really the board chair. And it's true, I remember Barry said, you know, his goal was to help me succeed. And so that's certainly my goal with the founder of Beyond Meat, Ethan Brown. You know, we're talking all the time, thinking about how can we, you know, take this to the next level in a way that still feels true to his vision. And then certainly having gone through the process before with honesty, to the extent I can be helpful at Beyond Meat, I try to do that. But now I want to share with you a little bit about just the big picture thinking of all of these things. So first we'll start with this Chinese proverb from an honest tea bottle cap. If we don't change the direction we are headed, we will end up where we are going, which of course is true. But when you think about where we are going as a society, it's the wrong direction. So every 5 years, the UN ranks the average life expectancy of all the countries in the world. There's about 200 countries in the world. And in the 2015 rankings, you know, I was really curious to see how the US came out, right? So we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. We have more knowledge of science and medicine and nutrition, and we spend more on healthcare than any other country in the world. So you think we got to be pretty good. Well, number 1 was Japan. Number 2 was Italy. Oh, Switzerland, sorry. 3 was Spain. 41 was the United States. And to me, that's a shameful result. So I'm incredibly fortunate and thankful to be born in this country. There's no other country where you can start with 5 thermoses and an empty Snapple bottle and build it into a $500 million brand. But this shouldn't happen. And while it is shameful, it's also an incredible opportunity for impact. And to help people in the world's wealthiest nation live up to their potential, we know people want to live healthier lives and better lives. We just need to give them the opportunity to do it through their diet. And that's what you're all here to do. And just one other way to think about it, I love telling this story, the tale of 2 Henrys. So there were 2 Henrys that lived in the 1800s. They both had a huge impact on the lives of horses. The first one was Henry Bergh. He was an American diplomat. He was living in St. Petersburg. And he saw that the Russians would work their horses to death, literally. Just, you know, horses would collapse in the street from exhaustion. And he came back. He couldn't change the laws in Russia, but he came back to the United States, created the ASPCA, helped pass laws to make sure horses were watered and rested and fed. And so he did a lot for horses. But there was another Henry who did even more. Henry Ford was in no ways known as a humanitarian. But by commercializing the combustion engine, he transferred the term horsepower from the horse to the tractor or the car or the bus. And if you were to ask a horse, who did more to help your quality of life? And the horse could answer in a language we could understand. The horse might say, well, Henry Bergh had his heart in the right place. But Henry Ford transformed the way we live. And you know what? At Beyond Meat, we're excited about the impact we're having on people's diets. And there's partners like PETA who, you know, lobby people to have more vegan diets, and we respect those people. But if we really want to change people's diets, we need to give them the choices that help move the needle. The fact is the percentage of vegans and vegetarians in the American population has been stuck at 5% for decades. We're confident that if we can get every American family to have 1 more plant-based meal per week, we can actually have the net effect of doubling that percentage, but it comes through the marketplace. And I will say in closing that this is not easy work. It's fun to be at a conference like this. It's great to feel like, oh, you know, it's glorious. But as Carol said, there's a lot of sweaty nights or terrifying moments. And I'll just say in closing, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt the people doing it. I'm glad to be part of the community that's doing it, and I look forward to sharing the journey with you. Thanks very much.
Terrific work, Seth.
Thank you.
Yeah, here, why don't you sit, don't get too scared. So you brought up a really interesting notion very early in that talk, which is vegan is a tough brand. Right? It's a tough term. Now, I was reading a Forbes article just yesterday that said, you know, every brand should call itself plant-based.
Yeah.
And clean seems to be a better brand, but from an industry standpoint, is that where things need to go? I mean, you've seen this with organic as well.
Here's what's funny about it. Because veggie and vegan is such a bad brand, it creates a real opportunity for us. The best brand we think is Beyond.
Yeah.
So when we go to a menu, it's like, oh, don't call this a veggie burger. Don't call this a plant-based burger. It's the Beyond Burger. And we'll say in parentheses, plant-based protein. But that's what's so exciting is that we're getting branding. Even in, most food service venues are reluctant to put someone else's brand on their menu. But what we see here, and obviously we try to make the case for it, is if you're going to spend the money to buy this kind of product, you should be talking about it as the Beyond Burger.
So does plant-based itself need this sort of overarching term?
No, I think plant-based is fine. I'm on the board of Ripple, which is plant-based dairy. So I think that overall, that phrase is more appealing. But veggie and vegan just are very limiting.
So on the food side, there's all this change that's sort of, undermining big food companies. They talk about the ankle biting, the death by a million paper cuts. But you've done a pretty good job of partnering with these companies.
Thank you.
So what's the balance? What do they have to offer?
Oh, man. So we're seeing it now in Europe. I mean, I go to Spain, and in a week, we see Honest Tea placed in more accounts than we gained in our first 3 years. And so, the scale of distribution, the ability to make things happen simultaneously is very powerful. And of course, I get excited about that when I see it in stores because I know what impact that has in the gardens around the world. So it really is that scale. So if you've got the right brand and you've got a clear playbook, the key for scaling with big companies is you have to have objective criteria. I had it in a slide, but I didn't mention it. Honest Tea is, we don't go say, oh, it's a natural tea and we're responsible. Fair, organic certified, that's a third-party certification. Fair trade certified, that's a third party. And the nutritionals, of course, also have to be objectively verified. So you can't rely on claims that you can't back up by a third party. And when you have that kind of formula, then you can scale.
You said the founder is really the only person who can say no.
Yeah.
Does that... not all founders want to work within the constraints of a large organization.
Well, I can tell you both from what I've seen within Coke, but in other companies too. What happens is you get these brands, brand managers basically last for 2 years max in a company. So someone comes into the brand, they want to remake it in their, make their impact. So they change the label, and it's a little bit like that telephone game with a bunch of kids. And by the time you get to 3 brand managers down, you can't recognize the brand. And I'm sure you could find lots of founders who would say the same. What's nice for me is this is actually more than what I hoped Honest Tea would be when I started 20 years ago.
So if you're a founder who's leaving, or who just can't play that game, there were those who wondered if Seth Goldman could. How do you sew it into the fabric?
Well, you do try to make that objective third-party criteria, right? So that can't be compromised. You can't do that. Things like branding, those are tougher, and there is a risk. I say that the best defense is a good offense. So the larger you can make it in the image you want to make it, the harder it is to change that once it's established.
And the movement is also important, right? Right? Getting to the consumer, having them be your biggest advocate.
It is, and growth. As long as you keep growing, that license is renewed every year, but I never take it for granted. And we had a little bit of a sideways year last year, and we made some significant changes in the way we were organized and the way we executed. And once again, it was good that I was able to be there through that transition.
So let's talk about growth for this next minute. I mean, you're in this situation now where you're seeing incredible scale, even beyond what you saw with Honest Tea. A lot of the brands here are going to see really fast scaling, really fast growth. What are your tips on managing and understanding that?
Well, part of it is physically, like, get your rest now, because it's tough. I mean, I spoke with Ethan over the weekend, and he went to bed at 5 p.m. on Saturday night. He's just exhausted. So get build up your strength. It's a marathon, and you gotta be ready. So physically, get ready. Get the right team in place early, and when you bring on someone like Chuck Meath, you got to be ready for the ride. You got to be able to have an organization that can handle the scale. So do all those things beforehand, and then make sure everyone understands where you're going. When you're sprinting as hard as Beyond Me is right now, you don't have time to get over to the side and say, okay, here's what our vision was, here's what we organized. Lay all that groundwork so that when it's ready to go, you go and everybody knows where you're headed.
All right. Well, I know we're headed, and that's the next speaker. And Seth, thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
For joining us.
Thank you.
Let's